Okay. We're back. Oh no, my camera. Wow. Okay, hey guys. Starting my new timer. Okay, sorry about like all this thing where we keep ending them. It's because we are switching phones and stuff, and I also want to make sure that these save. And the internet told me that Instagram can be a little bit shady about saving really long ones. So we just wanted to like make them shorter because we really want this to save so that other people that find out about it like tomorrow can watch it. Oh, George joined. Okay, so look. The other thing that you can do, actually, here, let's go look at the raised beds. You want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, look, behind us there are 4 raised beds.
You're gonna give it to me and I'll flip it?
Oh yeah, no, I don't know, it doesn't show, it doesn't, you don't know, it doesn't flip.
Doesn't
Just
flip.
follow.
Okay.
Okay, so look, point at the bed. So look,
Okay.
we have 4 raised beds here. Our friend Dylan that owns Ready to Grow Garden, he put these in kind of a long time ago before we moved onto this property. We use them as demonstration garden beds so that when people come and they're like, what should my garden look like? How many plants should be in it? We direct their attention over here. They're in pretty bad shape because we've been ignoring them for a while. Especially, we've been ignoring them during pandemic times because we're really busy. Oh wait, people are saying they can't hear me. But it's really normal for your garden bed to look this kind of bad this time of year. Especially if you're not replanting for the summer, then there's going to be like big patches, and you're going to slowly be removing plants. Like actually here, look, come look at our green beans.
I love how big these scallions got. Good lord.
Okay, look. This is like I'm showing you guys, I'm lifting the veil because we have so many unhealthy plants, but like that's really normal and natural. We were eating off of these like 2 or 3 weeks ago. These are green beans, and now they're like absolute toast, like skeletons.
They're done.
These are done. So these are gonna go into the compost. Like I said, a lot of plants are meant to like grow for a while, make you a bunch of food all at once, and then die. Green beans are the perfect example. We love growing these for beginners, and actually it's not too late in the season to grow them-ish. But these are what they look like when they're done. So like if I was working in this bed now and this was my bed at home, I would just be pulling all of this stuff out and turning it into compost. Look, I've also got a really unhappy zinnia. Zinnias will grow all season, but they aren't like totally permanent. So you could plant new zinnias now, but this is what an ancient zinnia looks like. This raised bed here, I cleared for you guys yesterday, except for these bolting lettuce, which I wanted to make sure that we could talk about bolting with these guys here present. But this raised bed, I'm sure it's like not that easy to tell, but this soil is pretty sandy. Basically like as your plants use your soil, then they're gonna basically consume the compost that you put in it. Compost isn't like a forever thing. You add it to your garden when you add your plants, and then they use it. And then all the biological activity happening in your garden, all of the things that live in your soil that eat organic material, they're going to consume it too. It's like
Some of it oxidizes.
And some of it oxidizes.
It just goes right into the air.
So compost isn't forever. Compost is sort of like a constant thing. And so by the end of the season, it's really natural for your soil to look like kind of spent or dusty, sandy, gray, like this stuff does here. I feel like it's hard to like show you.
Yeah,
guys,
and that top layer is getting beaten by the sun,
yeah,
and so it's not.
All that white and gray stuff is sand. So you're gonna always be working on getting your sand, which is an inorganic material, to your organic material ratio, that's going to be your constant soil journey, because as I said, rain and just general plant existence and use is going to always be eroding your organic material content in your raised bed. So if you don't want to grow food in your raised bed, or if you want to grow food and then do something else, you can cover crop in your raised bed. Cover cropping is a system that a bunch of really cool farms do. It's like a very integral part of like regenerative and organic sustainable farming. What it does is, what you do is you plant a plant that you're not going to eat as a soil conditioner in your off season. So our off season is the summer. So in New York, for example, they'll farm all winter and then, all summer and spring and fall. Oh yeah, you want to come over here?
Yeah, I want to come back over there.
Okay, that works. Leave it there. This way.
Okay.
We're repositioning. Okay, so they'll grow and then they'll plant something like winter rye in the winter, and it'll be like a cool tolerant grassy cover crop. What you end up doing is you just spread the seeds. If you're a huge farm, you spread the seeds with a tractor or an implement. If you're a home gardener, you spread the seeds with your hands. And then you let the plant grow until a predetermined age. The two main cover crops that we use down here, because we're in the tropics, are sun hemp, which is also referred to as crotalaria, or buckwheat. People also use cowpeas. I don't love cowpeas because they get a ton of aphids, but you can use cowpeas too. The legumes, which sun hemp is a legume and cowpeas are also a legume, they do this really cool thing where they have this relationship with funguses that live, bacteria that live in their root systems. And that bacteria will use the plant, the legume, to take nitrogen. Nitrogen is the macronutrient that your plants use to make green growth. It's a really important one. It's the
It
first
also happens
number.
to be the thing that makes up our air.
No, thanks.
Go figure.
So the bacteria will use the plant to take nitrogen out of the sky, which is amazing. Sky, air, sorry. And then it'll store it in its root system as nodules. They're called nitrogen fixing plants. The nodules are like physical fertilizer. It's basically like growing your own granular fertilizer. When you take a sun hemp that's grown to maturity and you pull it out of the ground, you can look at the roots, and they're full of these, they look like big pieces of sand, these white crystals, and that's like actual fertilizer. Like you grew your own fertilizer with a plant in your raised bed.
Yeah, I think that.
Super cool.
I mean, that is cool. The nitrogen aspect of legumes is really cool. What also is really neat about cover crops is you are also sequestering carbon. I bet people have heard that before. So you're actually kind of farming carbon, and you're actually bringing carbon back into the soil in terms of the biomass that's above the ground and the biomass that's below the ground. And it's not just the plant biomass. Having healthy plants in your soil is increasing the microbes and the fauna in the soil, and that's also biomass. So that's why we sort of stress always having the soil covered. I saw there was a topic on there about no-till gardening, and cover cropping is definitely a big tool of the no-till gardening world, whether it be large scale or small scale. So that was a good observation.
Okay, so look, I just saw the turn the screen around thing. It's like in the upper left-hand corner. I want Chris to we're gonna cover crop this garden for you, because I want to make sure people get confused about cover cropping and intimidated to do it. It's very easy. Basically what it is you're growing a plant in your garden just so that you can compost it in your garden. You know,
all the nutrients that you make, that nothing's being taken away from the soil, ideally.
Right. Like Your plant is using stuff in the soil to grow it. At the same time, that plant is using its really cool relationship with bacteria to get you extra nitrogen. Then you cut down the plant, you leave it on your garden. There's two different things you can do. Once you cut, okay, well, there's two main things you can do once you cut down your cover crop. So once you cut down your cover crop, you can either leave it on the soil surface and it's gonna dry out like straw, like a covering, and then it's gonna slowly decompose as things consume it, but it's gonna be incorporated into your soil as carbon because it's dried out. We're gonna talk more about that when we get to composting. But if you cut down all of your cover crop and then you smother it with something, the technical term for that in farming is occultation. You smother it with more soil, so you basically like bury it under a layer of soil. You can smother it with mulchy hay kind of stuff, or you can smother it with like a plastic tarp. Then your garden is gonna absorb that material as nitrogen instead. And that's also, like, I should just mention it, like, that is like the thing about composting. Like, people talk about greens and browns and carbon versus nitrogen in compost. This is the same thing. Anything that you put into your compost when it's dry and brown, that's going to become carbon. Everything that you put in your compost that's green, so like a living plant that you pulled out of your garden, doesn't have to be the color green. I guess I mean with moisture in it. Kitchen scraps like fruit peels and like onion scraps, whatever, moist things that are not dry. That stuff is all grass clippings. I saw someone mention grass clippings earlier. Those are great. All of that stuff will turn into nitrogen in your compost if you cover it. If you cover it. If you don't cover it,
It's
it
gonna
dries
oxidize.
out. It dries
gonna
out,
go
it
into the air.
oxidizes, and it turns
Global
into
warming.
carbon.
Global
Carbon.
warming.
You have to cover it. That's like the thing about composting that I think a lot of people don't get. And then they're like, my compost PS is super gross and full of flies and all the animals
I think
love
we
it.
might be confusing the topics here, though. 'Cause we're talking
Okay,
about,
sorry. But look, cover cropping is composting in your raised bed. And another term that, like, I know permaculture uses the term chop and drop a lot. It's the same family of concepts. You're growing a plant in situ. You're chopping it up, you know, like Mexican sunflower is really popular for that because it makes a ton of biomass. It just makes leaves, plants, stalk, like just so much of it. You cut it down and you lay it there, and it composts on the spot, you know. So basically, if we're gonna cover crop this raised bed, Chris, go get the seed. Oh, here, I'll go get the seed.
Okay.
We're gonna cover crop this bed.
We're going to cover crop this bed. One thing I want to talk about cover crop is it doesn't necessarily need to just be one species. I think we do that mostly out of ease, but a lot of farmers, when they do cover crops, use a variety of different species. Like you could have sunflower and sun hemp
Buckwheat.
and buckwheat all growing together, and they're all going to be dynamic. One's going to be dying off while the other's still growing, so you know they're not all going to grow in unison perfectly together. It's going to be a little rambunctious, but you will create a lot of habitat, and it's nice to have.
Oh yeah,
different
talk about habitat in the soil, root habitat.
Root.
While I do this,
root. What
like how sun hemp will keep all of your stuff alive because it needs roots to live in.
Oh yeah, I mean having plants in the summer, opposed to just sort of covering your bed, or I think what some people do is solarize your bed. I mean, your plants drive soil fertility, and so by having and we're not just talking about nitrogen and NPK. We're talking. There's so many things that plants need, and there's so much biology that plants need. And by having the plants there, they're creating the biology. Okay. So.
Okay, look, I'm gonna do this. Be cameraman.
Oh, you're gonna be cameraman,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna do some.
Yeah.
Some sun hemping. Okay.
Yeah.
Look at all these millipedes running away.
No. Okay, look.
Don't worry, millipedes. We're gonna give you some shade and some habitat real soon here. Okay, so we got got a nice empty bed.
Mm-hmm.
There's irrigation here, so
Get it out of the way.
yeah, it's this irrigation here. So I'm just gonna pull it here. We're gonna put this back. We're gonna irrigate our cover crop because you want to not just sort of forget about your cover crop. It sort of gets that thing. Well, it's not a cash crop. We're not going to worry about it, but we're going to want to irrigate it and give it some love. Some farmers actually recommend putting down a little bit of nutrition, a little bit of fertilizer before you cover crop. We've had a lot of experience with sun hemp. We know that's not necessary. There's some nutrients left over from the gardening series, so we're not going to do that. But here we got our sun hemp seed. I don't know if you want to look at this.
Yeah, show them the sun hemp.
Sun hemp seed, it's fun stuff. It's a legume. So it looks like a little bean. This is way more than we need for this 4x8 bed.
We sell it by the pound, like in a pound increment for raised beds. Half pound.
Half pound for a raised bed. But anyway, I'm not going to sort of overthink this. I'm just going to take a handful of this and kind of sprinkle it around. And basically what it's ending up looking like is about kind of a seed about every square inch or so. Okay, so I got them there, and they're all on the surface right now. Am I doing a good job here? So
Yeah.
Get out of the cable.
He's out.
I'm going to step in my garden, which is a no-no.
Breaking the rules. Okay, here, look. This is Chris's technique for getting it.
Okay, so yeah, I'm really good with a rake. It's one of my best skills. But so my back is straight, and I'm going to just incorporate these seeds. I'm just going to lightly chop the soil like this, almost like I'm just doing I'm just going to chop them in there.
Someone asked about an inoculant. You can use a legume inoculant or not.
Sure,
the inoculant is like kind of like playing it safe, but it'll like those nitrogen fixing they'll show up.
It speeds up the process.
Yeah.
Inoculants are great, and that's definitely, there's all kinds of biological inoculants you can use to improve your garden. Okay, so now all my seeds are about a half inch. There might be, so I'm just going to smooth it out. And then one thing that we didn't mention about cover crops yet is they're very fast germinators, and that means they kind of come up faster than the weeds. One really important thing about cover crops is it shades out weed, and so it kind of depletes the weed seeds in your soil by creating shade. And the one way it does that is because these seeds will just germinate so fast, and so basically they'll come out and hog all the sunlight faster than the weed seeds can do it. So basically kind of what they are is just really good weeds, and we're picking the weeds that we put in our garden in order to improve the soil, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
so true. Okay, so look, unfortunately we don't have a bunch of them to like show you, like we don't have mature cover crop to show you, but 6 weeks after this sun hemp is planted, you can chop it down. If you don't do that, sun hemp is like a serious plant. It's incredibly fibrous. It'll make 2-inch thick stalks if you let it. Also, I think a lot of people, they like to obtain a yield. That's a permaculture thing. It's really cool to be like, I'm gonna do fill in the blank, but I'm also gonna obtain a yield. But the problem is, if you obtain a yield, from your cover crop is going to take extra nutrients out of the soil to use to make its flower and seed for you. Like, so let's say you're growing a cowpea. Cowpeas are technically edible, but all of that nitrogen that you wanted in your soil, the plant is, and it's also phosphorus. Plants use phosphorus for making flowers and seeds. All of that, it's going to take it out of the soil and use it to make that stuff, and then you're going to take it away. So typically farmers will plow under or till in or
Crimp.
cover or crimp, which basically those are all the different words for ending your cover crop's life cycle. They'll do that before they flower. So for sun hemp, we usually tell people it's 6 weeks. If you do some summer math and you work backwards from the date that you want to plant your garden, We do our big summer sale for annual veggies right around Halloween. If you work backwards from there, you're gonna want to cover crop. You're gonna want to let the cover crop decompose, either on top of your soil or, under a covering or whatever.
Too much sun?
No, that looks good.
Okay.
You're gonna want to let that process take about 6 weeks, and you're gonna want to grow the cover crop for 6 weeks. So we're talking about a 12-week cycle, which is 3 months, right?
Where are we going?
I just want people to think about their garden through the summer. Like, you don't have to
Okay.
cover crop right this second, but one of the main things that we tell people to think about is like not just growing the cover crop, but also like letting it decompose, so that when pull, so that it's finished.
Yeah, a lot of times
But
we end up just taking it out
You can also just take it out,
and like putting it around bananas or something like that.
The way that you would take it out, sun hemp cover crop, is you would cut the plant at the base at 6 weeks. You would leave the root system in the soil. The root system, as the plant dies, is going to slough its nitrogen nodules into your soil, so that when you just give it a quick raking and all of those little stumps, they just come out when they're dead, they're not grabbing onto the soil anymore. You can put those in your compost, and then all those nitrogen nodules are sitting there and waiting for the crops that you're going to plant next, and then those crops are going to use those as food. And you can take all of the above surface sun hemp pieces and you can put them in your compost, or you can just passively compost them, like in your food forest or under your bananas or whatever. People have been asking about buckwheat, and I want to make sure we talk about buckwheat too, because we did this. We're talking a lot about sun hemp. Buckwheat is like a easier, because it kills itself. So basically, buckwheat, you'll sprinkle it around just the same. It'll only get like this tall. It'll make flowers that the bees are totally obsessed with buckwheat flowers, so it'll be covered in bees. It'll be really good for your insect population. It'll still be good for keeping your soil in place during heavy rains. It'll still suppress weeds, especially if you get it nice and dense.
Germinates in
so
one night.
quick. It basically, someone once referred to the cover crop that I planted in their garden as the grass, and I was like, but then I got it. Like, it makes it a very dense, you're supposed to make a very dense, like verdant, just green, solid thing out of your cover crops. That's what you want. And the buckwheat will flower, make seeds, and then it'll die, and it'll basically end up looking like straw, like really messy straw in your bed. And that can be a little bit more approachable, I think, for people than the whole sun hemp thing, because you have to kill the sun hemp. If you don't kill the sun hemp in time, it gets really big and blah blah blah.
I think the best way for terminating, especially even the sun hemp, is that we've both had experience with, and there's a lot of different ways to do this, but you cut it down at the surface, and so that means your bed like literally looks like a big pile of green sticks right now, and you're like, I can't plant in this anytime soon. But if you did your timing right, and it happens to be like August or early September when you're doing this, you have some compost ready to go, or maybe you have some leaf litter or something. If you shade and cover all of that material with like compost, maybe it's even just new soil or it's leaf moldings, that sun hemp will break down so quickly, and you'll come back in a month or 6 weeks and it'll all be gone, and it'll just be healthy, teeming soil. So that covering it with organic matter really helps it break down fast. But you gotta get your timing right, because if it's October and you still got this like forest of sun hemp, like, you just gotta get it out of the garden, put it somewhere else to compost and get gardening. So you didn't blow it, but you could have done it better.
The takeaway for building soil or taking care of soil in a raised bed, annual bed kind of system for us is you cannot do nothing. Like, you have to do something. So cover cropping is like the preferred thing that you do. You can also, if you're not going to be in town, or if you don't want to cover crop for some reason or whatever, or if you missed out on it, timing or something.
Or you have a really, really weedy bed.
Or if you have you can do a number of other things. You can solarize it, I don't usually recommend solarizing a bed unless you have a crazy nematode problem.
Solarizing
already.
is
Solarizing
covering
is
it with
just
clear.
covering it with clear plastic really tight. Water it, cover it with plastic. You greenhouse effect the top 2 or 3 inches of your soil. It'll basically fumigate your soil for pests. Your large soil population, they'll be able to leave to go down lower. It's gonna get really, really hot in the first few inches of your soil. It'll kill weed seeds, so it's good for really, really weedy beds where you lost control, because it'll fry the weed seeds.
Yeah.
And it'll fry nematodes a little bit. Like, it'll fry nematodes in the top few inches of your soil. Nematodes are a microscopic ringworm that cause root knots. You can Google that. I can probably pull out some plants and it'll be full of root knots. They damage your plant on the long term by like eating the roots and making them very brittle and not healthy, not fibrous. And they are a big problem in South Florida because they love sandy soil. So you can kind of like reduce their population over the summer with a good solarizing, and then you can, next fall, you can be like, I know I need more organic matter in my soil, so I'm gonna go really hard on the compost, for example, to try and like fix the nematode problem. So solarization is a thing, and even just mulching or strawing really thick on top of your bed is totally acceptable. The straw, if you put like half a bale of straw on a raised bed, which is like thick, like a thick cap of organic material on top of your raised bed, the stuff down at the bottom will be consumed. It'll be really moist and humid and hot and composty down there at the bottom, and so that stuff will decompose and become a little bit of organic material for your soil, and it'll do those things that we were talking about for cover cropping, weed suppression, and protecting your soil from erosion. Erosion during the summer is like a crazy thing. Like, you cannot leave, it's literally like the one thing. Like, you can't leave your raised bed exposed, because summer is an opportunity to make your soil better. And so
you're taking the sun's energy and you're using plants and putting that energy into your soil.
Yeah. So yeah, composting kind of, it goes hand in hand. It's a lot of the same concepts that we're talking about with
There are a
cover
trillion
cropping.
ways to rot things, which is really all we're talking about is composting, is we're
Rotting
rotting
something
things with microbes.
for good.
And
Good
there
rotting.
are a trillion ways to do it, and I saw somebody was like, can you ask, is composting for beginners? And there's like no one way to do it. Do we have time to talk about like banana composting though? Because I feel like it's something...
like around the banana?
Yeah, no?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
really...
Okay, no,
go ahead.
No, you go.
Yeah?
No, I just, composting, it's like,
Yeah, I like it when it's really passive, and so
Yeah.
there's a lot of like things where you can roll your compost, or there's really complex composting things you'll see on the internet that, you know, I don't know. Basically, I just think like having a pile is the best way to do it, and having a pile where you don't have to do a lot of work is one that I like. And so bananas are a really great way to just compost things. And
Yeah.
not that you're going to take the soil away from your bananas and like go at it in your garden, but this idea like, oh, like I want to hoard organic material. My neighbor put out a really beautiful bag of a clear plastic bag of leaves. I can see there's no trash in there. I want to
we
like...
totally do that, by the way, in our
Yeah,
neighborhood.
you go grab those leaves. Those leaves are full of beautiful chemistry and microbes and the nutrients that your plants. And so we'll just take those leaves and we'll go and we'll put them underneath our banana trees. And
Chris is also really into encouraging people to not let any organic matter leave their property.
oh yeah,
their
that's one of my
residential.
things. Yeah, I get it's a pet peeve of mine when I see a bunch of piles of palm fronds everywhere. I find a way to get all the organic matter that our trees make, all of our leaf litter, and some of the neighbors, and try to figure out how to incorporate it into my garden. And you'd be amazed at how fast it turns into bananas and leaves and shade.
I want to show you our bananas. I mean, I guess this is kind of the end. Like, compost, it doesn't have to be in a tumbler. It doesn't have to be like a clean, neat you know, if you go online and you start Googling like how to compost, you're gonna find a ton of information about, like, I think people get really scared of like the percentages. Like if you start reading something, it'll be like 10% like, you know, this material to 20% carbon to whatever ratio, nitrogen ratio. You definitely don't have to think about it that much, especially as a beginner. Your goal is to take something that used to be garbage, which is like kitchen scraps and plants that you're pulling out of your garden. Once you're a gardener, you have to pull plants out of your garden. That is part of it. The green beans are done, they're coming out of the garden. The kale is infested with aphids, it's coming out of the garden. You cannot put those in the garbage, and you cannot send them to the dump. You want to keep them and use them. You grew them. You took nutrients out of your soil and you grew that stuff, or a farmer did it, and then you took it home and you ate it, and you take the pieces and you're putting them in the garbage. Crazy. You want to be taking advantage of all of those resources. And so, like, yeah, leaf litter, palm fronds, cardboard boxes from Amazon. You know, now Amazon uses the brown paper. They don't use plastic tape anymore. Grass clippings, your neighbor's really fluffy leaf litter. It can all just go right into the compost, and it can all just go right under your bananas. I'm going to turn off my timer.
Okay.
Oh, and compost, if it gets hot enough. Okay, look, we're in the tropics. If you read material about composting, it's not written for you. It's written for someone that doesn't live in the tropics. Basically, because it's so humid here and because we get so much rainfall, everything is constantly composting, right? Like, you're buying lawn furniture and you're putting it in your yard, and Miami is composting it for you. So anything that you put in the compost is going to eventually compost very quickly. I mean, our composting, it goes so fast because the humidity and the rainfall makes the biological activity here explode. So it's like, it's really, really easy. It's fast, and it's a really great thing to have in your home, especially if you're gardening, because compost is really hard to find. It's really expensive. I know, my timer. Okay, I'm gonna turn my timer off. You go show them the banana.
Okay, I'll show you the bananas. Okay, we're back over here. So this is a typical banana cluster over here. You'll see there's a cinder block. I don't know why there's a cinder block there, but there's a big log, you know, we threw over here. It kind of came out of some mulch that we got. There's those old lettuce plants that we pulled out. You know, if we go and we prune these banana trees like we should, which we should only have like a few stalks growing, we could go ahead and just throw the leaves and stems that we had under there. And then if you want it to look neater, it's nice if you have some mulch around and you sort of cover the stuff that you put around your bananas with some mulch, and that'll help the process go even faster. And yeah, I love bananas for the passive composting aspect of them.
Like those bolting lettuces that I just pulled out of the garden while we were talking about cover cropping, I just threw them right in there. One of the cool things about this is just one clump of bananas. Like, this started as one banana. You want to back up? This started as just one little banana that we planted. This is a microclimate. You know, the interior bananas, the plant itself lives underground in like the corm, is that the word? In the root system. And these guys are temporary. This is gonna make us bananas, and then we're gonna cut it down. We're gonna cut it into pieces, and it's gonna be full of water and fiber, and then we're gonna feed it right back to the plant. And like all of the organic material that you just have around, you can just pile it up under here, because bananas are really heavy feeders, so they need like a ton of nutrients.
And it helps keep them really moist, and they need a ton of water.
Moist, and also this stuff is going to compost really quickly. I kind of lost my train of thought. This stuff's going to compost really quickly because this is a very moist microclimate in here. All of these bananas, these are made to trap rain. The rain is going to come down the leaves, and it's going to go all through these rivulets and drip off of these and drip off of the leaf tips, and it's all going to like just slowly drip into here and compost and turn into soil.
And it's so shady under there. You can throw your weeds, and even if they have seeds all over them, they're not going to thrive under there. The bananas own it.
Okay, look, we're gonna say bye. Right? Okay, so look, I think that timer meant that we're done. We're done talking.
Okay.
So I don't know, do you have anything like, oh, I want to say, okay, this was a really great experience for us. Thank you all for joining. We were really nervous about it because there's a lot of you, but
And it's so much to cover.
it's so much. We know that we barely,
We
did
don't want to
like,
butcher our rhetoric.
but it's like the tip of the iceberg over here. I feel cheesy being all promotion-y or whatever, but a lot of new gardeners are coming to us for resources, and they have a lot of questions, and that's why we made this. And we're open. We're selling soil, like our soil mix. We're selling organic fertilizer. We have seeds, and we have all those season-appropriate plants that we introduced you guys to earlier. We have all of them for sale. And before the pandemic, or we do a summer specific sale on purpose because a lot of these perennials can be hard to find. And we started propagating plants for that sale like in 2019 because some of them are really slow growing or rare, hard to find. And so we have them. Like, the world didn't stop in our greenhouse. And we're hoping that the, certain parts of your world aren't stopping either, like your relationship with your backyard and your relationship with plants. So if you do want to get some of those plants, we're doing like safe, no contact curbside pickup, like all next weekend, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and maybe the weekend after. And you can always like DM us if you have questions, and there's tons of information on our website. Okay, thanks.